Prior to this video, I just wanted to talk about this channel for a little bit. I was previously doing gaming content and some other random stuff, but I've decided to take a shift towards the commentary community. I personally prefer this kind of style, and I enjoyed doing the research for these videos. This will be my first video in the rebranding of this channel, and timing couldn't be more perfect with my graduation from college. Also, please bear with my editing. I am hoping to continue improving it over time as I continue making these videos. Now, enough rambling from me. Let's get into the actual topic of this video. First off, I'd like to discuss how our education system fails to teach us some of the basics needed to be successful after school. This topic may be shorter because there's a far more enjoyable video out there on this subject than listening to me just harp on about it. Boy in a Band had an absolutely excellent music video, Don't Stay in School. He released that nearly 4 years ago now. In the short span of 3 minutes, he was able to deliver a powerful message on how little the US education system teaches us. And here's a short clip of that video.
No, but learn mental maths, because you won't have a calculator with you every day. They say it's not the kids, the parents are the problem. Then if you taught the kids to parent, that's the problem solved then. All this advice about using a condom, but not for when you actually have a kid when you want one.
I'll leave a link in the description so you can go check out the full video. I highly recommend it. I remember one misconception many parents and teachers had with this was the message of the title. They believed Don't Stay in School meant for people to literally not remain in school. However, the true message is to remove the unnecessary components from schools. He even says it right at the end of the video. I'll cover that more in my next topic though. In school, we don't receive training for personal growth, financial management, communication, emotional training, or even ways to live a healthy life. You may think for some of them I am wrong, but reflect on your time in school. Did gym class really teach you how to properly work out, eat, and sleep to maintain good health? If it did, can you really remember it clearly, or was that class just an escape for you to forget about the other classes and relax? There are many occurrences in the life of a high school student. Most of those things are trivial matters like who's going with who to the dance, what are we doing after school, etc. That's what preoccupies most of the teenagers' minds though. I know I'm generalizing and there are a few students not like that, but it's hard to expect any student to take classes seriously when they are learning a large portion of unnecessary information. If classes on skills applicable to life outside of school and after graduation were incorporated, I wouldn't doubt if students started paying more attention. I personally haven't learned many things at all about life outside of school while I was in school. I learned about credit rates, how to build credit, money management, communication with coworkers, insurance, mortgages, and many more subjects outside of school. I was extremely fortunate to have learned and adapted quickly, but for others, they aren't as fortunate. There are many people who fail in life because they learn nothing of value in school. This all falls into the concept of conforming to society and authority figures. I will discuss this more in depth later as well, but for now I'd like to make mention to an article from the Business Insider. The link will be in the description below as well as all of the references. In this article, Meredith Lepore details how her adjustment from school to a professional work environment went, and how she had to change and adapt to it. We are taught to provide a person in power with a completed assignment we have been given by them. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? A teacher-student relationship, or an employer-employee relationship. We aren't taught that pointing out mistakes, making suggestions, or discussing new ideas is acceptable. And I believe adaptability is one of the most important traits to have in life. You must be ready for anything and willing to work with or around issues. I learned this in my first job I ever worked only weeks after I turned 16. I had to adapt to problems, missing supplies, and apologize to aggressive customers. School never taught me this though. There was no mention of how to adapt to a situation, how to calmly and rationally think out situations. Now, this doesn't need to be a whole course, but it definitely should be mentioned somewhere in classes and practiced. Teachers should give out projects and then throw roadblocks in your way in order to help you learn how to adapt and work around their roadblocks. Students could be so much more successful in life if they're taught how to solve these problems and think freely. I believe you get the point, so let's just move on to the next topic. As I said previously, we are going to cover some more of Boy in a Band's video. Within the current curriculum expected of schools, we see a large excess of unnecessary and completely useless information to a majority of students. I've always believed that high school should be more of a testing ground for students to select many of electives and determine what they want to do in the future based on what they find out they enjoy. If I had that, I wouldn't have wasted a whole semester in a major I found out I really didn't like. This is the case for many students as well, and they end up just pursuing general studies because they're clueless as to what they want to do. Let's start out by dissecting each class individually. Math is an important component in everyday life, and the course material up until high school is excellent. I'd even go as far as say that algebra still maintains some usefulness in everyday life. When we get to geometry, trigonometry, and calculus, that's when I say it's gone too far. There's a statistic that shows that student dropout rates increased as these subjects and advanced sciences began being introduced as a requirement. The article discussing this even says that only half of students earned above a C in college algebra. A fucking C. The fact that something only half of students could score averagely on is within the education system just astounds me. That's also why I plan to go in depth on why the grading system is also horrible, but that'll be in a later topic as well. Students learn differently and excel at things others don't. Everyone has different talents. I'm kind of going off on a tangent now though, so let's get back to math for now. The chart I'm showing on screen is also from an article discussing some statistics on how often sections of math are used within a workplace. We spend an entire year on each subject for basic algebra to be used 19% of the time, geometry and trig to be used 14% of the time, and calculus to be used for 8% of the time. That is honestly a sickening statistic when these classes are required at a majority of schools to graduate. Think of all the time wasted on something you will never use when there are so many more valuable things that can fill that space. We could probably just stop now and say those 3 years could be filled with courses to teach real life skills, but that wouldn't be any fun now, would it? Let's move on to science now. Biology, earth science, and chemistry are some of the major courses thought of when discussing science in high school. How many of you have even thought of any of these subjects since graduating? Or if you're still in school, will you even have any use for these? I know I haven't even touched on any of these subjects in any of the 5 jobs I've worked, not even the slightest reference to them. So unless you're specifically going into the field that requires this, you will most likely not think about or even use these topics again. So congratulations, you just had 3 years wasted on these subjects as well. I do think science is important, and at least learning the basics of these 3 could be nice to understand more about the earth, your body, and how chemicals work and react. However, dedicating so much time to fleshing out so much material is a complete waste of it. That's why I say electives should be a priority in high school. Allow students to choose if they want to try one of these subjects, and if they enjoy it, they can pursue it. That also saves time for students who don't enjoy it. Those students could just move on and be glad they tried it, or they can drop the class early and pick something else up. History is a complete mess in high school. I believe it is one of the most important subjects because we can reflect on the past and what mistakes were made. However, what is the point in going all the way back in time to the Mesopotamians and learning about all the history of every other country? I had 2 years dedicated to global history. History is a great point of discussion, but learning about irrelevant parts of history is just another waste of time. You probably hear me saying that a lot, that it was just a waste of time. Learning about the Holocaust, the World Wars, the Cold War, and how all of those things happened are important in preventing it from happening again. That's why there's an importance in global history, but only the last few centuries are important enough to warrant this. Hearing how Napoleon's conquest or the Mongols' conquest can be interesting, but there isn't much you can relate it to in the modern day that most parts of recent history can't already relate to. In addition to all this, the most important jobs that earning a degree in history can help you with are lawyers and history teachers. The final main subject in most schools is English. The most important for communication, but lacks any real training when it comes to communicating. You learn a lot of vocabulary you probably won't use, especially in this modern era where we like to text the letter U instead of the entire word and shorten many other terms to communicate swiftly with our companions. I'm using different vocabulary for comedic effect. Is it working? Probably not. Anyway, most of my English classes revolved around reading books and writing papers on them. We had a few research projects here and there, but not too many. Honestly, I think a lot of the English curriculum is useful still in everyday life. Cutting out some books and the nightmare called Shakespeare, I'll get to him later, can open up a lot of room to do more research papers. and I think researching is one of the most useful things I got out of English class. We all do research on subjects that matter to us, whether we realize it or not. Just think about the last time you looked something up that you were curious about. That's doing research. Plus, if teachers leave the topic of the research papers up to the students, it can really help promote free thinking. And electives. They really are dependent on the school you go to, but I know my school was small and barely had any decent electives to choose from. I also had absolutely no electives in my desired career path at the time. I wanted to go into programming for games and software, but the closest thing I got was web design, and just one YouTube video on the subject put me leagues above the teacher and other students. I was actually exempt from all the future assignments to assist the other students. This just goes to show that depending on your school, you may or may not find electives relevant to your ideal job. So these classes aren't in excess, but a scarcity. That still holds true even if you do have a lot of electives, because you're so limited in the number of classes you can choose, you can't possibly attempt to take a course in each subject of interest unless you have a short list of things you want to try. Overall, we have little choice in our education, even though we are supposed to be learning what we want to do in the future by the time we are in high school. We lack a lot of the time due to so much irrelevant information our brains are being filled with to later forget because we have no use for it. That's something that definitely needs to be fixed. These next few topics I'm going to condense and go over as quickly as possible because I absolutely don't want this video to get too long. I mean, I still have 8 topics to get to and we're past the 10-minute mark already, but I just need to make sure I get all these main points across no matter what, so we'll probably end up paying 45-50 minutes easily. Anyway, let's get into the next part of this. The grading system is basically the school trying to put a rank on your intelligence. In a way, the valedictorian and top 10 only goes to further prove this point. But like I said before, each person excels in different areas. A person who may not be very intelligent in history or science may be incredibly intelligent in math and machining. The system can easily make people feel inadequate if they don't have high scores and creates a fear of failure. And failure is essential to growth and learning. Most students look at high grades as their end goal. Some even focus on them so much they forget everything else important to them and solely focus on studying. We become machines in order to succeed. This was originally going to be a high school oriented topic, but I soon realized this applies to college as well. No matter where you go for school, you're being graded. This video by AJ Calais, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, was one of the biggest eye-openers for me when it came to how much this grading system can really destroy someone. You may immediately think that depression due to failure could be the biggest problem, but AJ shows us the opposite problem. He became a machine focused solely on perfection, and here's a short clip of his video.
At the time, to me, an A was the only acceptable output. If I didn't get an A, then I was a failure. I wasn't a good machine. And what good is a useless machine? I did nothing else outside of school to the point where I let my GPA be the sole source of my self-worth. But now that I think about it, the 4.0 I got with that extremely unhealthy thought process was the true failure.
And don't forget to go check out his full video for everything else he says, because it's definitely an interesting watch. Shakespeare. I've done an entire research paper on how useless his work is in the modern world. I understand introducing him through a single piece of his work, such as Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth, to help students determine if they'd like to pursue drama, theater, or classics, but for some reason we are required by the government to go over one of his works every year. Why? Why in the hell is this forced down the throats of students when a vast majority hate it? You waste so much time on this when students could care less. I saw many students sleep through this nonsense, and I eventually became one of them because I could not stand it anymore. When I was forced to go over Shakespeare in college, I became livid. I have no interest in classics. I do not care about how he impacted modern day English, and all I care about in English is the modern day English we use, so I can communicate effectively with my peers and others. Now, like I said, I'm trying to condense everything. I could honestly rant and rave about this topic, go on about how we lack the scientific evidence to prove that this is an effective learning tool, and how there is more evidence of its ineffectiveness since it causes so many people to doze off or let their minds go to la la land. However, I'm going to save you the time because you're probably one of the people who understand this point completely and don't need an in-depth explanation. If you do need one, read the article I linked below on it. The college credit system is almost as unintelligible as including Shakespeare in the curriculum. If this credit system was applied to each relevant class for a major and you had to get the sum of all those credits, it would be a fine system. However, when colleges demand you have a specific number of credits, and some of those credits have to be from electives that have absolutely no relevancy at all, it just looks like a giant cash grab. I took all my business courses and would have had the knowledge required to continue my education or move into a field of work related to my degree. Yet, I wouldn't be able to graduate because I didn't take a random elective. In this last semester, I had to take a liberal arts elective, and I took an English class based on literature and film. In what world does that have any relations to office management? I do not need that to understand management. That's just a waste of my time, and if I fail the class, I can't graduate. This just makes the credit system look like it is in place to force students to pay for more classes and books so that the schools can make more money, which I honestly wouldn't care as much about if there wasn't an academic inflation in the job market, which will be my next topic. Now, this may not be completely related to the education system, but this topic is very personal to me. My mother was a victim of this issue. She was denied a position that she could easily perform and had 20 years of experience, but no degree. The new norm for the job market is to raise the required amount of education for a job and to ignore experience. Jobs that could have been gone with a high school degree a few decades ago now require a bachelor's degree, and jobs that required a bachelor's degree can require a master's. In most cases, a person with a degree and absolutely no job experience can be selected for a position when a person has years of experience with a company but has no degree. This is one of the most unintelligible things and honestly could be looked at as a form of academic discrimination, if that was a real thing. We have age, gender, and racial discrimination, but nothing in relation to academics and experience. Now, I'm not trying to push and say that this should be an actual law or anything, but when we look at how the other types of discrimination work, it wouldn't be a completely insane idea. Through multiple laws, employers are not allowed to use gender, age, or race to determine who is most qualified for a position. So, who's to say the amount of education someone has determines their qualifications for a job? Of course, there are exceptions because there are jobs that do require extra education, such as being a doctor or even police work where you have to go into criminal justice and whatnot, but I digress. I've seen many jobs that require a degree but then teach you everything you need on the job. Sometimes the degree doesn't even have to be relevant to the job you're working. This was the case in the situation with my mom, and it was ridiculous. Academic discrimination may be an outrageous idea and not really part of the main point of this video, but I wouldn't mind hearing people's opinions and thoughts on that idea. Anyway, let's get off this topic and on to the next one. I've talked a bit about the lack of free thinking and conforming in a few of my previous topics, but it does deserve to be talked about in its own section. We see cases of people like AJ becoming machines in order to succeed. He even stated that he was basically taking in his work as an input and returning it to the teacher as an output. We see this in a lot of everyday life outside of school. Bosses will assign jobs to employees and they will mindlessly go about this task until it is complete and return it or report to the boss that they finished it. It's a standard set for a work environment nowadays. You often do not see employees who end up thinking outside the box and attempt to create new ideas because those people are generally the ones in charge, and sometimes even the people in charge just listen to the highest power in a company and do what is told of them. This standard destroys creativity, and this is all that's taught in school based on the process of doing work. We receive an assignment, we complete it, and then we return it to the teacher. No one makes suggestions to a teacher about what to cover in homework assignments because even from a young age, we're taught to do it and return it. You ever heard a teacher ask for suggestions on what to include in the homework assignments? If you have, you probably had a great teacher. We need creativity. We need to avoid becoming machines. We evolve and advance as a society by creating new ideas and methods of doing things. We discuss these ideas with others and work to create even better ideas by using multiple creative minds. How are we supposed to do that, though, when our brains are trained to fall into acting like a machine? It's like Pavlov's conditioning. We get handed an assignment, and our brain immediately thinks it must be completed and returned. Then we do it. The bells we hear when class ends or start immediately signals us it's time to leave or to be in class. That's our input, and our output is standing up and leaving, or sitting down and arriving. We become machines with the goal of completing our tasks and sitting in class until we hear our bell. One of the main arguments against the people pointing out flaws in the education system are the lack of involvement of parents, and that parents should be teaching children about life. It's a valid point. The problem is, how are parents supposed to teach their kids this stuff when they were never taught it, or taught that it's what you're supposed to do as a parent? You're expecting something of the parents that were never informed that they were expected of this. In addition, there are many parents who are, for lack of a better term, inadequate. There are people who don't know how to be a parent. There are also single mothers and fathers out there that are giving all their energy just to work enough to put food on the table. And you expect these people to come home and give their children a lesson on life? They don't have the time for that. Neither does the school, because of its curriculum and abundance of useless information. Another issue is the fact that many parents may not even be fully aware of what is being taught in schools. I know my father had absolutely no involvement or knowledge about what I did in my school, and my mother only knew what she had to help me on the homework with. They don't get information from schools telling them everything that occurs in class. The best they get is a syllabus going over the summary of what would be learned over the year, if their kids even give them that. Overall, people arguing this point put far too much expectation on parents, and when they have no idea what the situation at home for each individual is. I can't really place the blame on teachers or schools themselves. They too are just doing as they're told. The government tells them what they need to teach and what is required of students, and teachers have been speaking out on it since 2011. They are as upset as I am about it. They are constantly forced to change how they teach and what they teach. That'd be extremely frustrating to deal with, especially when you know that you are teaching stuff people won't use. Has another student, or you, ever asked a teacher why they're teaching something? Probably heard the response, because it'll be on a test. They most likely don't know why they're teaching it either. It's just what they were told and expected to do. Which brings me to Common Core, a complete disaster of an idea. Even after hearing outrage from teachers saying that they're changing things too much, Common Core was introduced and fell apart. The biggest problem this imposed was the high-stake testing. Teachers would have no time to teach anything else but what is on the test. This would have literally become the system that created machines out of people. This article from A Viewpoint in Japan even states what many supporters of Common Core ignore is that the rigorous high-stakes testing approach that they wish to impose on our children has been experimented with in many other nations and has been a complete failure. Once in place, it dominates all instruction, turning schools into test prep factories and students into test-taking machines. This could have completely destroyed any chance of freedom in the education system. An engineer tutored children in math and was astounded at how high level of math in place was for Common Core. Many problems in an Algebra 2 course being at a calculus level. She even went as far as to state this isn't education, this is child abuse. That statement may be a bit of an exaggeration, but coming from an engineer who works with high-level math for a living, I find this statement to be a powerful deterrent to ever support Common Core or any system like it. I enjoyed reading her take on Common Core because of how passionate she was. Students are expected to meet the needs of the school, but school should be meeting the needs of the student. What I mean by this is that students in the current system are generally expected to meet with specific criteria in order to graduate based on an unfair grading system and school system. Our schools fail in giving students who excel in certain areas the opportunity to demonstrate their ability in that area, but grant students who excel in current curriculum an easy pass. I was one of the students who was given an easy pass. I had no issues in any of my subjects and consistently received above average scores and making honor roll. But I'm not trying to brag. My brother struggles with what I excelled in. He excels in hands-on work, but he was never given an opportunity to graduate on those merits alone, even though there are many jobs out there that look for people like him. Creativity and free thinking are almost completely stomped out of the current education system because we are so razor-focused on the importance of an old and broken education system that needs to be fixed. I have 2 final links to put down below, and next to Boy in a Band's music video, I believe these 2 are the most important for you to look at. I'll go over them all now. Sir Ken Robinson is an author who appeared on a TED Talks to address that schools could be killing creativity. I highly recommend checking out the full video, but this is a clip of one of the most important points he makes.
Suddenly, degrees aren't worth anything. Isn't that true? When I was a student, if you had a degree, you had a job. If you didn't have a job, it's because you didn't want one. And I didn't want one, frankly, so... but now, kids with degrees are often heading home to carry on playing video games. Because you need an MA, where the previous job required a BA, and now you need a PhD for the other. It's a process of academic inflation, and it indicates the whole structure of education is shifting beneath our feet.
He continues from this point discussing how intelligence is diverse and dynamic. He covers multiple points I've discussed here and makes other strong points about creativity. Next up, I found an extremely interesting and promising article from the New York Times. This article discusses how a school is working to take a new approach towards learning for students. They removed letter grades from the picture and encouraged students to work on the grade level skills. Some of these skills include writing scientific hypothesis and identifying a story's themes. After they've completed this, they can move on to the new skills. They do not fail, they are only meant to learn the material. I think this might be an excellent step in the right direction, and I recommend reading this article as well. Lastly, I want to give my opinion on what should be done with the education system to genuinely improve it. In my opinion, I believe the government needs to take a step back. They should develop a system with teachers, and perhaps take this Brooklyn school as an example of what could be done. The government and teachers should work together to determine what is important and what isn't, what difficulty is acceptable and what is too far beyond a student's capabilities. After all, it's what teachers were trained to do in college. I can't say the same about the government officials. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you sincerely. I'm sorry for the length, but there was a lot to cover here. I've spent over 8 hours just writing out this script and researching, so hopefully you enjoyed it. Please leave any criticism below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. That should be shorter than this one.